from Lviv. I'm joined now by Klaus Larres. He's a professor of history and international affairs at the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. Thank you very much for your time there, Klaus. Now, obviously, we just heard an update there. These images that are circulating are prompting widespread outrage against Moscow. Of course, accusations like this have to undergo the meticulous investigations by the ICC. But Russia has gone beyond just denying this. Russia is saying that these images are fake. It's a very difficult thing to say that when you have reporters all over the ground, you have politicians on the ground viewing it, experiencing it and reporting on it. What is Russia's strategy here, not just to deflect with these images, but also perhaps responding to the question by our reporter just there from Ukrainians, why? Why would Russia do this to civilians?
I mean, these crimes are so horrible. Of course, any government which is responsible, like Russia, has to deny that it is responsible. And we cannot really believe what Putin and his crew in the Kremlin are saying, because he also told us for weeks and weeks that he would not invade Ukraine. And of course, we are now in the 40th day of a terrible war. So in all likelihood, what we have seen from the reporters on the ground, like your own reporters, what we have seen from or heard from the authorities in Ukraine and international observers, these are true crimes. You know, civilians have been slaughtered, rape is being used as a weapon of war, torture has been committed, several hundreds of civilians have been killed. This is all very terrible, and of course it needs to stop immediately, and Putin should really give the order to the local commanders not to do anything like that. It is difficult to say that Putin himself ordered his soldiers on the ground to commit these crimes. This is probably unlikely, but he could certainly give the order to say, please stop anything like that, don't do that. And I think that would go a long way to stop Russian soldiers from committing these terrible crimes.
Putin obviously wants something out of this advancement. You know, there is a goal in mind here. But what hope is there for diplomacy at this point? What hope is there for Putin to gain something from these kinds of actions?
Well, that is what we don't know. We don't really know Putin's war game and his objectives. We thought initially that he would like to take Kiev and conquer the whole country. Now he's withdrawing from Kiev, and he seemingly seems to focus on eastern Ukraine, on the Donbas region or the wider Donbas region, which he now wants to take. It seems also the Black Sea coast, perhaps including Odessa, he wants to conquer. We don't know for sure. But peace talks are being still continuing, and the next ones are supposed to be held on Monday by video link. And of course, the crimes and atrocities we have just learned about, that will impact these peace negotiations. On the other hand, it should not be a reason to stop these peace negotiations, because the only thing we really need to obtain is an immediate end of the war. And if these peace negotiations, so-called peace negotiations on Monday lead to that, then of course that chance should be taken.
How might evidence and these images that are coming out of Bucha change geopolitics? How do you undo sanctions after this? I mean, Russia is, after all, it's a UN nation. We're not talking about ISIS here. How can the West then try and bring Russia back into the fold in the coming years to try and make it part of the global community again, if it has been, in fact, been convicted of war crimes like this?
That's a very good question, and that's a very difficult question to answer. It's almost impossible. We just have to look at Syria and a similar butcher in Syria. And of course, Assad is still in power, but he hasn't been brought back into the international community. And no one suggests that is what we should do. In the end, it needs really a change of regime, a change of leader, at least in the Kremlin, so that with a new team in power, the West and other countries could negotiate and try to bring Russia back into the community of nations. When you think of the Second World War and the Nazi leadership in Germany, they had to go. Would it have been possible to bring the Nazi leadership back into the international community of power after 1945? Of course not. That would have been impossible. And I think it will be very difficult to deal with Putin after such a war and such atrocities. However, if there is a new leadership in Russia, and I'm not talking about a forceful regime change, but a regime change which comes from Russia itself, from the Russian people or from the people in the Kremlin, if they get rid of Putin and put someone more reasonable, more moderate into power, then I think people can engage with Russia again. And they, of course, need to engage with Russia in the end, because it is a very large and populous country which should be brought back into the community of nations. But it's impossible to see that that can happen with Vladimir Putin still in charge.
And in the short term, how far can the US and the EU go to try and squeeze Putin and Russia? I mean, of course, tougher sanctions are being discussed, but Germany says gas cannot be subsidised in the short term. How can Europe navigate calls for squeezing its dependencies on Russian energy and resources and try and punish Putin in the meantime?
Yeah, there are really three energy sources the Europeans are dependent on. That is oil, coal, and gas. Oil and coal can be relatively easily be replaced, and I think total sanctions of Russian coal and oil is being discussed and probably will be implemented in the near future. Gas is a very different matter, particularly Germany, Austria, Italy, for example, are highly dependent on Russian gas. Austria, for example, depends on Russian gas to 80% of its energy. This is quite a high amount. But in the end, I think the Europeans will have to swallow that and say, we have to end the war, we have to squeeze Putin as much as possible, and we have to make severe economic sacrifices ourselves. Hopefully temporary sacrifices, but I can't see that they can continue receiving gas from Russia and also pay Putin an awful lot of money, almost $1 billion a day for that, and then also fight Putin and try to end the war. So in the end, the Europeans will have to make very tough choices and also tough sacrifices themselves, hopefully for only a short period of time.